Hi, everyone, and welcome to my weekly series on marketing that I do at 9:15-ish a.m. Eastern Standard Time. My name is Nicole, and I like to think of myself as somebody who's interested in small business development marketing topics. And when I meet interesting people, I like to come and have them come and talk about their area of expertise. So in talking to this week's guest, Zac Miller, he's a media professor, he's a producer, he's a videographer, he does like a lot of really cool projects. And he's here today to talk with us about podcasting, which I think people are increasingly asking me about. And I appreciate having his expertise. So, hey, Zac, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me, Nicole. I appreciate it. This is great.
Is there any like helpful background you think people should have in terms of like your background or how you approach your podcasting work or your video work?
You know, my background is very much in television. So I spent about 10 years working in unscripted TV, some documentary work, reality TV. So I'm very much of the mindset of building a story, right? So when you're filming something that is actually unfolding in front of you, you have to go back and edit it and then find that story and find the way that you want to express what you actually saw happen and take something that could be like 100 hours of footage and cut it down to 1 hour. So that's part of what's really exciting to me about storytelling, especially with sort of documentary work or when you're doing interviews. It's sort of similar too, and that bring that to podcasting for sure.
I have so many questions about reality television. I won't ask them now, but maybe off the screen.
We could do a separate reality television. Yeah. That's great.
All right. Well, if you want to be on a reality show, just kidding. But if you want to like get in touch with Zac, I'll also put his contact information toward the end of this as well. But this is his email, and it's a great way to get a hold of him in terms of if you want to talk to him about projects and stuff. Again, I will show this a little later in the broadcast. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about podcasting. It's something that, like I said, people ask about a lot. And something that I thought would be interesting is, as you've worked with businesses and media companies, is how does someone evaluate whether a podcast is a good thing for them to spend their time on, marketing wise, budget wise, that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, podcasting is just exploding right now, right? Podcasting is exploding in popularity. So many people are engaging audio in ways that they haven't in the past, which is really exciting. Excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat here. And there are so many ways that a small business or big business, really any size business, can engage a podcast, right? One of the great things about podcasting is the people who are doing it successfully are really finding a niche, right? Finding a really specific thing that they're talking about, that they're making their podcast about, whether that be related to a geographical area or it's related to a certain hobby or music type of music, whatever it is, right? So it's a great way to engage a really specific audience for your business that falls into that niche, right? So if you have a certain product you're trying to sell and you know that X type of person likes that product, or typically that's your target consumer, there's probably a podcast that nails that audience and would be happy to play an ad. If there's something that adds value for the audience, the podcaster is likely going to be interested in bringing that into the podcast, talking about it, maybe even interviewing you. You can run normal advertisements, right? Sort of a host read ad. I'm sure if you've listened to a podcast, you've heard a lot of these, I go to Squarespace or whatever, right? For a website kind of thing. But there's also other ways to advertise on a podcast, right? You can have you can build a segment around an idea, around your product, if it really is something that fits with what the podcast is about. Or you can have the host interview you on the podcast, right? I've heard that done in a really interesting ways. So there are some really interesting things going on with monetizing and with businesses advertising on podcasts for sure.
Yeah. And so, I think too, what Zac is saying, which I think is a really good point, is that yes, you could have your own podcast, but also you can think of it in terms of using podcasting as an additional tool, whether it's like something that you keep producing on an ongoing basis or whether you figure out ways to work with the podcasting community. And yeah, you can obviously use it a little bit more indirectly. So like I had a podcast a few years ago. It was a local podcast and my co-working space was one of the sponsors of it. And we got a few hundred listeners every week. And a lot of people said that they heard about the co-working space. They knew about the co-working space partially from hearing about it on the podcast. So I wasn't really making any money directly from it, but I was kind of broadening because people were interested in the geographic area I was podcasting about. They heard about my business. But another way, like Zac said, is to like make money off of the actual podcast. Like you can monetize the actual pod, not just like be like, okay, well, I'm going to mention my co-working space and hope people come in. You can actually make money directly on the podcast through advertising and other kinds of partnerships too.
Yeah, you're totally right. And I didn't even talk about like, right, if you want to make your own podcast, that is such a powerful tool, right? And that's sort of what I do with people all the time, right? So, I would say for making your own podcast, the biggest thing is just, right, letting people know who you are, like you were saying about your co-working space, but also then creating a sense of credibility, right? This is something, a podcast is better in some ways than other forms of media because it's something that's serialized, right? It's something that every week or, every 2 weeks, whatever the case is, someone's listening to what you have to say. They're building that credibility. They're building that relationship. So honestly, it's like, I know some of the podcasters I listen to, I almost feel like I know them personally. And I've even reached out to some of them, right? And I'll find myself like writing an email to them, like I'm writing an email to a friend. And I'm like, oh, wait, hold on. This person doesn't know who I am, right? I've spent 100 hours listening to this person's voice. They have no idea who I am, right? So I think that's really interesting and powerful. And the other thing that could be really powerful for a business, especially starting out, you don't need your podcast to have 1,000 listeners, 10,000 listeners for it to be successful, right? Again, if you're creating a niche, if you're in an industry and the 10 powerful people in your industry listen to your podcast, that could be a slam dunk, right? That like your audience could be 15 people, but those 15 people are important to you and important to your industry. That could be huge, right? There's also sort of the factor of if you are, let's say you're trying to get new clients, right? If you reach out to some business or some business owner and say, hey, I'd love to work with you. I think it would be a great fit, blah, blah, blah. There's like a, somewhat of a chance they'll get back to you. They probably won't, right? Like in a lot of cases, with just a cold outreach. If you reach out to someone cold and say, hey, I have this podcast. I think you'd be a great guest. Come be a guest on my podcast. A lot of times they'll be like, oh, that's really cool. Sure. Yeah, I'll do that. And all of a sudden you're building a relationship with that person, right? And then 6 months down the line, maybe they are a client, right? Just from that sort of outreach. It gives you just a different way to engage people, again, who are related to your business, either as, on whatever side of it.
Yeah. And I think that's really good to know because it does seem like there's a little bit of what people feel like is a barrier to entry with podcasting. I had to throw, as soon as you said, like, I had to throw this up. Like, it's a little blurry, but yep. Totally. He's like, what it feels like to listen to podcasts. I think, and I think we've all felt that when a podcast is really good. So giving people that opportunity if you have a podcast is great, but you can also participate in podcasting either as a guest or, like I said, as potentially as a advertiser or brand partner or something like that too. So just don't think like, okay, now I have a weekly thing I have to produce that's going to take me 20 hours to be able to participate in this kind of thing. So now, Zac, what I appreciate is you're coming from like a video background and this is audio storytelling, which obviously is very similar. And I'm curious though, because I work with a lot of people and they're like, I don't know how you go live every week, and do video stuff. It's like, feels intimidating or it feels like, oh, I have to do this whole thing. How is audio in terms of storytelling different than video storytelling, and how maybe some people feel like this audio might be a better fit for them in terms of a format?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, a lot of people are uncomfortable in front of the camera. Even I am, right? I'm definitely a behind the camera guy. So for me, I know personally, like I'm much more comfortable podcasting, right? I teach video production. And so like I can talk about this stuff forever, right? Like that's easy for me. It's like once I sort of get all the distraction of like cameras and, all the equipment and lighting and stuff, like it's a lot, right? So for me, podcasting is especially exciting because it's just the barrier for entry is much lower, which means that for, working with someone like me to produce, it's a lot cheaper, like significantly cheaper. A degree of magnitude cheaper. it's also exciting because it's serialized, right? So in a video, a lot of times we'll make, 1 or 2 videos. Maybe with TV, it is serialized, but still you're making seasons. A podcast can go on for a long time, right? So the really interesting thing about podcast storytelling is it's sort of an iterative process, right? You do an episode a certain way, you think it's really good, you listen to it, you change something, your audience, someone makes a comment or gives you some feedback, you change it based on that, and you can kind of keep refining it. So in an ideal world, like if you're doing it right, honestly, unless you just are really, really great and nail it on day one, which most of us don't, like even I don't, right? Then your podcast is going to sound different from episode 1 to episode 10, and then episode 10 to episode 20, etc., because you're tweaking it, and seeing kind of what works and what's comfortable and what's fun about it, right? And what I tell a lot of my clients is like, look, if this is sort of fun for you and you're engaged by this and you like doing this, that's going to read and that's going to be interesting for your audience, and your audience is going to enjoy it. And it doesn't have to feel like a job, right? And I think that is in many ways why storytelling and podcasting is different, because you're not like, I'm going to show up for a day and shoot this video and edit it into something. Like it's much more sort of on your own terms, which is cool.
Yeah, and I hadn't really thought about it, but it's true. I guess when I've watched TV shows, they figured out like the format and they've committed to doing that format indefinitely. But when I think about some of my favorite podcasts, I know that they've made changes, or they've decided, we're going to have an additional episode and it's going to summarize monthly or something, what's been going on, in our podcast for those people who can't listen. They figure out ways to sort of, I guess they really seem to take a lot of feedback from their audience and change their format. That's a really good point.
Yeah, and the best people really are doing that. And that's the thing, about TV. It's like we shoot a season of television before anyone sees it, right? Mm-hmm. Even reality TV, right?
Right.
Some of the shows I worked on are a little different. I was on Big Brother. That show's live 24/7. I was a production manager on that show, and that at the same time though, it's sort of like you almost have to ignore the audience because you're just in it, right? And there's so many people with so many opinions. It's a whole different story.
Yeah. And I will say too, from the format of, if you're going to think about doing it yourself, audio editing is a little bit more straightforward than video editing. So for example, if we were going to cut this video here, I should keep my hands held like this so that when I cut it, my hands are still in the same place. Whereas with audio, if you've never edited audio or video, you've got this line, and it is easier to make that cut without like the continuity necessarily being messed with. And like Zac says, you don't have to like think about lighting. You don't have to, think about like, I should have maybe I'll schedule a blowout and do all my video work for, for the next month in one day or something like that. So it's a lot easier to sort of figure out. Now, I think besides so I think people are watching this or because they're thinking about podcasting, or they're saying, I really like the idea of the audio format. I like the intimacy of it without necessarily like being in people's faces in a way like they are on video. But I think they feel like there's a technological barrier and maybe like a perceived cost barrier. So what are some of the tools, like if you were going to advise someone, obviously you have like professional tools that are like probably really nice compared to the average person. You sound like, for example, like listen to the buttery voice.
Yeah, listen to I'll just get right on the microphone.
yeah. So like, you can spend some money on that, but also like you probably have figured out like tools to either make recording or deploying the podcast easier, or just like actual equipment. Do you have any recommendations for people who are thinking about trying this out on their own?
I do. I think, a lot of people get hung up on the equipment. Like I spend a lot of time sort of just in the podcasting, message boards and, groups and things like that. And like the first thing people are asking in these groups is like, what do I need to buy? What equipment do I need? And really, like, honestly, you don't. Oh, my webcam. Okay, there it is. You don't need to really have that much stuff, right? Like I think audio quality matters, right? So make sure you're recording in a quiet room. Make sure it's not like super echoey, right? But like for instance, your cell phone is a pretty good audio recorder, right? If you're holding it relatively close to your face, you're not like breathing into it. You're not like blowing air into it. And so that will work really well. I would also say here are the tools. Let me just share my screen. I have a couple things that I pulled up. Let's
Yeah,
see
sure.
if I can do that.
Yeah, no problem. And you know, while Zach's doing
Okay,
that,
I got it up.
are you ready? Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. Let me add it in here.
Okay. So there's a few tools that I really like, and they are free to some extent, right? They're free definitely to try, and they're not super expensive anyway. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce this. Auphonic, is awesome. Like you literally like you load your audio in and you hit go, and it will take out background noise and it will like auto level everything so it's all the correct like loudness, and it will just basically master your audio for free. And like it can't, if
Wait,
you record really
it's
bad audio,
free?
it's free for I think 2 hours. Yeah, 2 hours of audio per month. So if you're doing, a 20-minute podcast once a week, you could get away with this being free forever, right? It's really cool. It's super easy to use. It's all web-based. Highly recommend for sure. It doesn't make really bad audio good, but it makes decent audio much better, right? It will take away reverb and stuff like that. It's really cool. The other thing that's pretty neat is this company called Descript. They are a transcription company that then you can literally edit the transcription. So you don't need to know anything about audio editing, or it works with video too, but I'm a little bit curious to see how it works with video, because video editing is a little more complicated because, again, you have the continuity of the actual image that you have to worry about. But in audio, you don't, right? So this is their little video that they're playing. But it's like literally, imagine like a Google Doc that if you took something and just deleted it, then it deletes it from your actual audio. And you can take something, you can copy it and paste it and move it and whatever. So just working from a document format that everyone is very used to, you can be editing your actual audio. So you can record your audio on your phone, upload it to Descript, edit it, right? You can even use Descript to like put on some music and stuff. And then you can export it, run it through Auphonic to get that auto leveling and sort of that goodness, and then post it. Like that's a really good, simple workflow. And Descript does cost something, but again, I think you get, I'll click on their pricing here. I think you get
That's not, yeah.
some, for like $12 a month, and there is a free tier, and I definitely 3 hours of transcription one time. So
you could try it out and see if it was worth spending $12 a month,
Yeah, totally. So really cool. Then there's Squadcast, which is like another sort of recording software. So it's like basically Zoom, but it records high quality audio. Like it's made to do one thing, which is to record really good audio. So if you're interviewing other people over the internet, like you can use a program like this. You can use like what we're using for this, which is StreamYard. Will also do something similar. There's a price for this too. There's a free program. I think it's called Zencaster, which is a free version of this. I don't think it's going to be free forever, but like they made it free during the pandemic, and so I think they might have launched during the pandemic.
Now, I have a quick question. What's the difference between using like something that records a high quality audio like this and just getting a good microphone? Like what's
that's a great way to do it.
Okay. So either way it would be similar.
Yeah.
So either like you could get a good microphone, and by a good microphone, I mean, I don't know, you probably have a much nicer microphone than like
my mic is a Shure MV7. It's a podcasting mic. It's the one that's right in front of my face here. It's like $230. Like, I mean, that's a chunk of change, but it's not crazy,
Right.
It's like less than one lens for video. Right?
So I just have this like super basic Yeti thing, and I got this little screen because I apparently make harsh P sounds. But the screen was like $5, but like the microphone I got used on eBay, or I got it on eBay for like, I'm a huge eBay electronics person. I think I paid $120 on eBay. And it's not the newest version or something, but yeah. And I will say too, and I can't do it during this broadcast, but often what I do with people is I like, if we're on Zoom or something, I'll turn on my webcam microphone and talk, and then I'll turn on this one, and they're like, oh, I hear the difference. So it's something you definitely like notice, but you can also iterate toward it too. I was just curious with the high quality recording, if like someone just was using their webcam mic and use this, if it would still come out like pretty good.
Yeah, it would. It would. I mean, so basically, the way the high quality recording works is it's recording locally on each end, right? So,
Oh,
it's
yes.
actually the
Okay.
audio isn't going through. When you're recording like a Zoom call, like it sounds and looks kind of zoomy, right? Because like it's going through the internet.
Right. Or
And
one person
so,
sounds really clear. Whoever's recording on their
yeah.
side sounds really clear, and the other
And
person
the other
doesn't.
person that sounds good.
Yeah.
So so they sort of fix that
Ah,
problem using this technology, and then it all goes up to gets saved to the cloud. It records on their computer, but saves that recording streaming to their cloud software, and then you just download it. So you have access to like the full quality recording on both ends,
oh,
which is
that's
like
great.
your typical double ender recording, which, if you want to get into like, old school sort of like radio recording, that's what they would call
Right.
it.
Or
A double
trying to
ender.
get someone to be able to say, like, oh, hey, can you record this on your end too? And trying to explain to them how to do that.
Yeah.
This takes
Yeah.
all the
So,
guesswork out of trying to do that. That's awesome.
yeah. So, these are cool programs. And I think it is, yeah, I think Squadcast is like very widely used. It's a little pricier. But I think Zencaster, yeah, see, it's like $20 at the lowest tier. But I think Zencaster is, let's see. It's funny, one of their competitors has an ad when you search them.
Yeah, you buy
Yeah,
competitive
so this is like free version, which works just as well. Yeah. You can't it's like you can do video with these two. And I think you can record video with most of these. So it replaces like the Zoom call, right? But it works in a similar way, which is pretty cool. And then for actually like posting your podcast, right? There's stuff like Red Circle, which is here. There's a bunch of basically platforms for hosting, right? And it's sort of like web hosting, but a podcast goes out on what's called an RSS feed, and that is what gets pushed to like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, all these big places where people are actually consuming the podcast. You need a host to actually push it out and like organize it and send it to those places. So somewhere like Red Circle this is totally free. And they basically make their money by taking a percentage of like ads if you run ads on your podcast. So that's pretty cool. I haven't used Red Circle myself. I use some of the paid ones. I use Buzzsprout, which I think is pretty cool. I like it a lot, and it's not that expensive, like again, $12-13 a month. But all of these like $12 a month things definitely add up for sure.
Right. Well, I mean, either way, you're paying for web hosting. You're paying for your website or whatever files you put on the internet to take up some kind of space anyway. So, and that's, I think $12 a month's pretty competitive.
Totally.
And I'll throw this out there super quick. If you are running a WordPress website, there's an app called Blueberry Podcasting. It's spelled wrong. But
yeah, BLU. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think it's spelled like that. I think I took out the right. I think I took out.
Yeah,
maybe there's one
right.
R. I don't know. They take out some vowels. It's something like this. And what it does, if you're editing in WordPress, there's the page title and the description, and then there's a separate area where you put your MP3 file. And obviously you need to have a higher level of hosting to be able to, host MP3 files. You're probably also going to want to like reduce the file size after you edit it, if you can. But if you use a service like this, it's going to take out a lot of headache for you. But if you do want to use your WordPress site to do this, there is a way to do that through this app. The paid version just gives you better stats from what I can tell.
Yeah, and Blueberry's great. I mean, they have a really good reputation in the industry, and they've been at it for a long time. And you can also host like through them otherwise, right? You don't need to just do their
right. Yeah.
The plugin is very widely used, which is really cool. And then you're sort of in control of it, and they help you just kind of distribute it, which is neat. And you can distribute it yourself too. Like if you have your own website, if you have a bigger company and your own web team, like you just need to basically manually submit to, or like set up your RSS feed to point it toward everywhere you want it to go. And then, you can be off to the races yourself too. So if you're a web person, definitely doable. Yeah. This is all done through big companies that want your content, right? Like Apple wants your content. Spotify wants your content, right?
Yeah.
So just a couple other things that are kind of cool. Like, then there's like marketplaces, right? If you ever want to actually monetize your podcast, like if you want to monetize in a way that, you're running ads or doing stuff with brands, you can use something like Podcorn, which, they're paying you a certain amount based on your audience or based on the results. So a lot of times you'll see podcasts saying like, use offer code, whatever the offer code is for 10% off. Well, every time that offer code is used, the podcaster gets money, right? It's like any kind of affiliate marketing. And that's how companies are tracking how podcasters or how different podcasts are successful with their brand. So, you get the customer gets 10% off or whatever the thing is, and the podcaster gets maybe another 10% and the company gets that sale. So it's a win-win. And there's also some good sort of tracking involved there. And podcasters can also sort of leverage their social media accounts and things like that, and also sort of publicize the company and that offer and still see the results. So it's sort of an all-inclusive, like if you have a bunch of followers on Instagram or something, and your podcast has many fewer, you can still be leveraging sort of that type of advertising, which is cool. And then this is my podcasting thing, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah. Awesome.
So cool. So yeah, that's what I had to share. I can stop sharing my screen here.
No, that's great. Thanks so much. Those are great. And I think if I would have had them years ago, I would have probably saved myself a lot of headache. And I had to find while you were talking. So when we did our podcast, we called it the blanket fort, and nobody really believes that it was a blanket fort, but this is my co-host Nina with a guest we had. So we had this whatever $50 like microphone, and then we put blankets all over this.
It looks like a Star Wars character. You had a Star Wars character you were talking at.
Yeah. Well, but it was it was, like when people go watch their kids' soccer games and they have the little pop-up tent thing. It was one of those covered with blankets. And I remember somebody came on as a guest and they're like, oh, wow, there's really a blanket for it. But it's because where we were recording was my office, and there's not a lot of soft surfaces in the office. So, so don't think you necessarily have to get super fancy. Like these tools, along with you kind of,
any dynamic microphone, like that's the key. Get a dynamic microphone, because that will help to isolate all the other audio in the room and just sort of feature your voice. Those are the kind of microphones that you can get really close to and talk right into. So that will help a lot with like those kinds of problems. But yeah, you want to be in a room with lots of like soft spaces, and so you don't have echoes and things like that, which will just kill you. And the audio processing can only do so much if your audio quality is low. The other interesting thing just about Descript that I forgot to mention, which is so clutch, with one click of a button, it will take out every in your podcast.
So like you can find and replace. So find all the delete, and then it
will automatically find all the and all the like repeated words and all the filler word. They call them filler words, and you hit one button and it takes them all out automatically.
Yeah.
So it's like already that could save someone who's not a professional like an hour of editing right there.
Oh yeah.
More. Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely for sure.
So really, really cool. And you're right. Like there's so many. Part of the reason why it's such an exciting time in podcasting is because there are so many really interesting companies that are really getting into the space and making it so easy. Like the barrier for entry has never been lower, right?
Yeah.
You can actually produce high quality, like super high quality podcast in your house for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say too, probably in watching this, people are thinking like, oh, this sounds doable and stuff. But I still want maybe a little bit of hand holding, or maybe I want someone to sort of help me figure out the more technical or the weirder parts. And I know that that's part of what you do in your line of work is you're like a producer, or like I don't know what the other title would be, a director. I'm not sure. But what are the different ways? And I know that for me, I was shocked to find out from my editing friends that there was like 10 different kinds of editors you can have to edit your writing.
Yep.
And I'm sure with podcasting, it's really similar. So if somebody was looking to be like, okay, I want some help, I can't pay a high quality former TV producer like yourself to like sit with me every week and record. What are the different ways that someone like you can work with someone, and how would people kind of go about finding a producer that they could work with?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot of ways that I add value for my clients. I think so first of all, just like, yes, there are a million types of producers, right? And even in, this is like sort of the joke in the, movie industry, right? Like I'm in the Producers Guild of America, and they had to create like a special like PGA mark that appears in movies to basically signify like which producers were actually like the working producers who made the thing, right? And not just like the guy that got the credit on the whatever because his like uncle gave the money for the whatever, right? So, there are lots of kinds of producers, but what I do is basically I can do everything, right? I can do like a fully turnkey service where you come to me with an idea, we flush it out, I record it every week with you, edit it, turn it around, put it like post it, do everything, right? But a lot of what I do for clients is also just sort of consulting work, right? Like helping people refine their ideas, figure out what the format is, because a lot of what the most important thing is just nailing down your format. Like, what are you trying to say? What are you trying to do with your podcast? And I think if you're considering starting a podcast, whether or not you're working with a producer, I think the first questions to really think about and ask yourself are, one, like, who is my audience, right? Who am I trying to engage? Who am I talking to? And what is the impact that I'm hoping the podcast will have, right? So, what is sort of your goal of doing the podcast? A lot of people get into podcasting because they think it's fun. They want to do it as a hobby. That's great. But a lot of people are doing it for business, and it's a creative solution to a business problem, right? So what is sort of the business problem you're trying to solve? Do you want more customers? Do you want more credibility? Do you want to do you have a service that you want to do like classes? Like, what are you trying to do with it? And you can tailor that to sort of the way that you go about making your podcast from the get-go, and who you're inviting to be on it, and how you're setting it up. And I think all of that is definitely like worth putting a lot of thought into at the beginning. So then you can just kind of, roll with it. And again, tweak it as you need to, and as you're going about it. But a producer can definitely help you sort of nail those things down, and then help with sort of the things like workflow, like I'm going to use this to edit. This is how I'm comfortable. This is my experience level, because everyone's comfortable with different levels of technology and things like that. And can sort of just like basically like almost like a startup package, right? Like a consulting and starting package, which is kind of like an interesting thing. And something I like to do is, give people the tools they need to be really successful with it for the long term.
Yeah, and I appreciate all the resources that you shared with us in terms of like doing it for free. And the reality is that as the business owner, maybe you're just really excited about recording it. Maybe you're excited about thinking about the topics, but maybe the idea of editing it, maybe the idea of like publishing show notes and putting it in the feeds or whatever. So you don't have to, it's not an all or nothing. And I feel like that's with most marketing tasks. If there's parts of it that you like to do, there's no reason to take that away from yourself. But if there's some minutia that doesn't excite you, you could pass that part on to somebody that can help you out.
Totally.
And and this is my final question for you, which is,
okay.
I'm sure that you listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen to a lot of podcasts too. And as somebody who like does this for a living and sort of knows like, oh, they're doing this, and the different sort of engagement devices and things like that they're using. What do you think makes a great podcast?
That's a great question. One of my favorite podcasts, or maybe my favorite podcast, is How I Built This, which is Guy Raz, NPR, just really great business storytelling. And I think that's sort of the key thing about, right?
I love that one too.
It's great. Yeah, it's really good. And it's huge too. I mean, it's not a deep cut for sure. It's a very widely listened to podcast. And it's really good because they do a really good job crafting a story around their interviews, right? And sort of setting up just enough so you're really engaged and sort of rooting for the person that you're hearing from, right? And I think that is hard to do, actually. I think that can be hard to do, right? And
well, it depends. Because going into some of these interviews, I'm thinking, I am not sure if I'm going to find it hard to root for this person. But by the end you are,
Yeah, you're totally rooting for them. You're on their team. And that's definitely a big part of it. Like, you want to, people are listening to podcasts a lot of time because it's engaging, but they also want to learn something. They also want to get something out of it. I listen to podcasts a lot. I listen to a lot of podcasts. And when I hear a podcast that is, some I just listen to that are just kind of fun and silly, but even like the comedy ones I listen to, I feel like I'm getting something out of it, which I think is really important. The other thing I think that makes a good podcast is definitely having like a good hook, right? Something in the beginning that is capturing me, that is really interesting. And like How I Built This does a good job with that. They'll just play like a couple lines like from sort of a disastrous moment in this business's story, and just to be like, oh, like what, how did they get there? And then, when they finally get there, it's sort of like a reveal. It's fun. So there's a lot of, I tell my students, just it's like the simple sort of setup and payoff, right? Like if you're going to set something up, let the audience have that payoff. Let them like hear sort of what, get something that makes them feel satisfied, right? You should leave every podcast sort of feeling with a sense of satisfaction, but also sort of wanting to hear more. You don't need to do the like Joe Rogan 3-hour podcast interview in order to be successful, right? I actually think the other thing that's really interesting and worth mentioning is like shorter is sort of becoming more and more in. And as people get more and more engaged with like voice only devices like Amazon Alexa and stuff, like, or as soon as in the next couple of years, I think Apple is no longer going to be the number one podcasting platform, and Spotify will be. So creating content that is like not half an hour or an hour long, but is like 5 minutes long or 10 minutes long is going to start being really key, because then people are going to end up putting that and mixing that into like a playlist, like with music, right? It'll be like, here are the 3 songs I like to listen to in the morning, and then here's the 10-minute podcast I listen to, and then here's 10 more songs, right? And I think that's really interesting versus like, here's 3 songs, now here's an hour-long podcast, and here's 10 more songs. Like that doesn't work. That doesn't have the same flow to your day and your routine. So I think there's a really big opportunity right now in short podcasts.
Well, and if you think about it too, like TV shows, right? It's like infinitely more bingeable to watch 2 or 3 20-minute shows in a row than for you to think about, yes, I'm going to sit down and watch a 2-hour movie, even though it's the same length of time. Like mentally, you're like, oh yeah, I'll watch a show. Oh, maybe I'll watch another one. And I feel like if somebody wanted more content related to that podcast, they could just listen to more episodes in a row, as long as there wasn't a bunch of filler, right? Which I think people are less and less tolerant of anyway. But yeah, I think I think the shorter format is really interesting. And I've seen a few people do that well, and a few people, do that not so well. But yeah, so for those people who want to know more, if this is, you're like, oh, this is so fun, I enjoy spending time with Zac. I mean, me too.
I mean, who wouldn't, right?
I mean, who wouldn't? First of all, like you can just contact him directly if you like are thinking of a project or something like that, and you just want to, maybe talk about the logistics of it, how he can help you. His email is on the screen. We'll also put it in the show notes as well if he wants that generally out there. If you want to learn a little bit more and have a little bit more of a presentation format and less of us just talking back and forth and me putting up silly memes, the St. Lawrence County Chamber of Commerce is doing a webinar with Zac next Wednesday. But if you go to this 7th. URL, the 7th. Yeah.
The 7th at noon.
Yeah, at noon. So Wednesdays at noon is when they typically do their programming. So if you go to the St. Lawrence County Chamber's website, you can find information there. But also we have the link on the screen that goes directly to where you can sign up for the webinar. You can obviously attend it live, but also if you sign up ahead of time, I think they send you the recording, which is super nice of them. And the other thing too is if you are thinking that there's something between you wanting Zac to do everything and wanting to learn more, we are going to be doing, Zac is going to be doing a 4-week like in-depth session. If you're a member of Anchor Space, you're going to have free access to this. If you're a non-member, you're going to have to pay a little bit of money, but it's totally worth it. As you see, look at how much he gave you for free. Imagine how much he's going to give you in a class that you pay for. We're going to be putting that out on our newsletter. It's going to probably be in the later part of May, early part of June. So it's going to be a 4-week class, like 2-ish hours. You'll have homework, but like fun homework. And super fun, and he can give you like equipment recommendations, things like that for how to do it without breaking the bank, and maybe helping you approach your individual project in a group setting.
Yeah.
If that's of interest.
You're gonna learn how to like soup to nuts. You'll have the tools to go and make your own podcast.
Yeah. So we're just putting that out there. If you sign up for the newsletter, as soon as we have a set date, we're kind of going back and forth because we both have projects and we're both run small companies. So sometimes we have to be flexible with our dates. And so just join the email list and you'll hear about it when we've got that going on. Zac, thanks so much for your time today. Is there anything else you want to mention before we hang up?
So much. No, this has been great. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on your show. This is so much fun. So thank you.
Yeah, no, I love having like my smart friends come on here and talk about what they know a lot about. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, feel free to share it with a friend. Wherever you're watching this, there should be some kind of share button, whether it's on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. And also, if you enjoy topics, you can send me an email and suggest a topic. I'm going to throw my email on the screen right now. I'm open to topics. If you want to come on and be like, hey, I know a lot about this thing, we can totally talk about that as an opportunity. But if you have a question, I know lots of smart people, and if I can't answer it, I can get them to come on and answer it. So just feel free to email me if you have topics. And we go live Tuesdays at 9:15 Eastern Standard Time. So we will see you next week. Take care, everyone.
That's great. Bye.